All right. And we are officially live. And everything looks good. All right. Yeah, we're here with Chris. I had a discussion on the heat problem with him the other day, and we wanted to talk about moral foundations. And yeah, if you wanted to introduce yourself and maybe a little bit about your position.
Um, I'm I guess I would consider myself a Baptist as far as doctrine goes. I don't know which direction we really want to take this, so I'm just gonna say that I'm a Baptist, and that's pretty narrow as far as the different denominations. So my name is Christopher Silvius, and then that's the name of my channel. So I think that our discussion last night was like awesome. You know, I think a lot of people would say that I didn't know understand what I was talking about. I probably didn't. I mean, I admit that I'm not the smartest person that's out there. So I just tried my best, and I appreciate like the mutual respect that we had in that debate.
Yeah, and you're definitely a very civil person to talk to, even though we clash pretty hard on some of our opinions. Um, and yeah, so I guess I will explain my position on uh, morality. Well, I mean, for some background, we were talking about the other night. Got into your position on the government and how they should treat LGBT individuals, and so I guess I wanted to kind of explore how you came to those positions and kind of, but beyond that, I would be more interested in like the foundation of your morality and basically how you know anything is good at all. Um, and I guess for my part, I would describe, uh, I'm an atheist, but I would describe my morality as secular. So it's basically, it doesn't operate on any principles of atheism. It doesn't have to reject a god. It's it's incompatible with divine command theory, which is kind of the whole thing it's built off of refuting. Um, so I believe there is objective morality, and that the moral relativists and the um, yeah, I think moral relativism is basically meaningless. And I think you can measure morality, and the way that we would do that is um, basically what it comes down to is uh, freedom of a system. So the more something can do, the more good it has in it. And I basically just derived that from the English usage of the word good. And so, and I'm not equivocating and I'm not making up my own definitions. Like, I'm on a crusade against atheists who say, like, either moral relativism or they try and do the cop out of, like, well, I just define good as being thriving of the human race. And we can objectively measure whether human race is doing good or not. Therefore, that's objective morality. I don't think that's good enough. I don't think that's. I think that's kind of missing the point, because who cares? Why should I care if the human race is doing well or not? I think we should, but I don't think that anyone really answers that question. So the point is basically, how do we use the term good? If something is good, it's good at something. The more it's good at, the more good it is. And when we're talking about an objective good for the universe, we're talking about baseline. The universe has to exist at all in order to be good at anything. So, um, so that's kind of the foundation of my morality. Does it exist or not? And what can it do? And the more things that exist and the more things that they can do, the more good there is. And basically, that kind of can be summed up as freedom. So, for example, it's basically just coexistence. The more we can get along, and bad things are things that destroy other things. So an evil thing is something that destroys life or destroys other things. And if there's two forms of life that can coexist, that's better than two forms of life that um, can't coexist and one must kill off the other. And that's just by the pure definition of what good is. So, uh, yeah, let me know if that makes any sense.
Yeah, it it makes sense. It's just it's hard to think of a world without God and how you would really, you have a good idea and everybody has a general understanding and there's a mutual agreement on, we shouldn't hurt people and we shouldn't molest children and we shouldn't steal and lie and basic things like this. Uh, but at the end of the day, if no one is in control, someone like Adolf Hitler, who makes these laws that are based on what was it called? There was a term for
The final solution, or
no, I'm drawing a blank right here. There was a laws based on genetics, where he would say that these particular races of human are inferior, and therefore we are justified in reducing the population in this area or the
mm,
other. Who's to
eugenics.
say that that is wrong if what he is saying is right and he's ultimately going to take over the world and it's going to be better than it was before? And if he doesn't uh, be given the power and be given the legislation to be able to put this in action, well, then the world will just be chaos. It's going to fall. It's already falling apart. So, we need somebody who can actually understand what we should do. So you go past this mutual agreement and into we like a survival mode. I think that that's what they was in, like in Germany. So they was looking for someone to save them, and this seemed to be the guy. No one knew that he's completely out of his mind until later. But I'm just saying, why do you think that atheistically he was wrong to do what he did?
Well, I guess first of all, God's gonna let him do whatever he wants anyway. So he's I don't see God weighing in on it at all. Um, us even if we have a supposed word of God, it's still up to us humans to debate each other and interpret the word of God because God's not going to come in and enforce anything until everyone's dead. Um, but so atheistically, it doesn't matter whether there's an enforcer or not. It only matters whether it is correct. So judging someone based on their race is a fallacy, so it's incorrect. And
Why?
why is a fallacy incorrect?
No, why is racism, if you will, incorrect, as you put it? Why would that be wrong?
Well, it's just factually wrong. Like you can't take the traits of one person and assume that another person has those traits just because they share one trait. I forget what fallacy that's called,
What
but
what if you could look at them as some sort of pest?
you couldn't look at any
And
individual and say that they're part of that group.
if you could like make up some kind of scientific laws,
Well, then they
and
would.
put that in legislation,
It wouldn't be true though. Is the thing.
how do you know?
How would I? Well, I mean, are you asking how would we know anything?
Well, I mean, just think
Because
about it. Think about like growing up in a wicked society like that, and just being an atheist and thinking, how can I even say that this is actually wrong? What if you were like in one of the high ranks, and you were benefiting from this, but you'd
mm-hmm.
never been taught anything else? Uh, and even at the point that you are taught that that is wrong, how do you decide what side you want to be on? You're already there. There's not a lot of those guys that are on that side and then just choose to give it a a lot of the people that followed Hitler, like as captains and stuff, they are. I don't know. I think they went to prison or something, didn't they? They didn't like repent after it was over. They didn't feel bad for what they did.
Mm-hmm. So I mean, with the objective moral model, it doesn't matter who you are. So you could be personally benefiting from a heinous act, but it doesn't matter. Morality is not about any specific one person. It's or it's not centered on like, oh, if you hurt Jeff, it's fine, but if you hurt Toby, it's not okay. Um, you have to have the same rules for each person. So, and that is what is logical, and logic can be used by anyone. And it doesn't matter if there's a God or not. People will make selfish decisions to make bad decisions to benefit themselves. It just matters what is your personal commitment to the truth. And there are fallacies involved in everything that's evil, that I'm aware of, and so I view it as a completely logical pursuit. Like, you can actually go and test it. If you think all black people are dumber than white people, you can go take an IQ test. You can, or you can run the American experiment and show black people can be just as successful as white people. And I mean, as far as the Nazi example goes, even Hitler made exceptions for the Jews. He Germanized several Jews. He he had to recognize that this idea of racism is factually incorrect. You can't judge a person's character traits, or really even a lot of physical traits, based on their bloodline.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, obviously, I'm a Christian, so I agree that it's wrong. I'm just saying, uh, hmm, even if it's like, okay, so I think we can establish that certain things are scientifically like, yeah, if you say that that race is uh, inferior to one of these other races, that's scientifically incorrect. But if you wanted to say, be the god of your own universe for one day, and you just decide, since you have the power and you have the money, and you're in this like, I don't know, let's just go wild. Let's say you want to start your own nation, you know, and you want to build a certain kind of people to create this new world, you know, that is, you know, it's like ideal, like you have all these ideas and everybody agrees. And in order to have this, you have to exclude, you know, any other cultures, any other skin colors, anything like that, because it has to be a pure, you know, kind of a religious. Uh, it's like your heritage. So if if you use that, if you make it sort of like a cultural thing, then there's still a problem on how do you tell if that is right or wrong. Is that cultural movement, which is not scientific, but it's based on, you know, an idea that if we live this way, things will be better. If we don't, it'll get worse. You know, if we stay exclusive and we benefit from each other and we pass on our knowledge and we keep that secluded, you know, that's actually how a lot of civilizations, nations have grown to great power, like China and Japan. Uh, and their culture is amazing. It's very advanced. But
Well, I don't think
who's to say that
that's
communism is wrong? You know, because look how they're prospering over there.
well. Certain people are prospering, but it's I mean, communism just doesn't work, um, factually. But
Well, it
um,
works for the people who benefit from it.
yeah, I mean, uh, if you get away with murder, that works. Just because something happens doesn't mean that it's good. So if something happens that reduces freedoms, then that's a bad thing. So um, I don't think it's necessarily wrong to have like an exclusive club. Like I don't think it's wrong to exclude people from property or anything like that. I'm a libertarian. I believe in privacy. I think if a bunch of people want to gather together and say only we're allowed in this area and no one else is allowed in, I think that's totally fine. It's when you start um, forcing people who are born there to adhere to like not leave, or forcing certain people um, out of their homes that they already had, or killing people to expand. That's when uh, you start reducing the amount of freedom and existence in the universe, and therefore it is like, I mean, it's a tautology at this point. You are just reducing the amount of things that exist and can coexist. And so the things that can't coexist are both destructive to other things and to themselves, because they end up collapsing from within, like communism does, and fascism. They basically are unstable, but inclusivity and like private property rights, that's completely stable, and we've tested that throughout time. And yeah, does that make sense?
Hmm. I think what I'm really just trying to point out though is that if there is no God and there's no standard law, then everybody really has a rubber ruler,
A rubber
and
ruler.
it doesn't take a genius to figure out that that system is not going to work. Meaning, every nation has their own ideas of what is right and wrong, and you're never going to get all of them to agree. That's why there'll never be a one world order. If Satan doesn't get involved himself, there's not going to be a new world order, because that's impossible. People do not just unite and agree unanimously all over the world. Arabian kings and their palaces, with their robes and all their sickening Sharia laws, they're never going to give up their power. And if there was a spot available for them to take over the world, they would do it in a heartbeat. They wouldn't let some other person take it. So they're all divided. They're all power hungry. They're all measuring their dicks amongst each other, trying to see who's bigger and fighting. That's what war is about. It's about money, it's about power. So, given that, how can you tell one or the other that they
Well,
are right or wrong?
well, I mean, if you're making a factual statement, you can analyze like the racism thing. You can factually prove those statements wrong, but the point about coexistence is there is one objective way to have people coexist. Like, not, you don't have to have everyone agree. You can have vanilla and I can have chocolate. You can have Allah and I can have Buddha, and we can have, I might think it's right to I don't know, eat nachos on Super Bowl day. You might think that nachos are an abhorrent thing, that it's a disgrace to the temple that is your body, and but we can still live next door to each other, and as long as we're not tearing down each other's homes, then both our ways of life can coexist at the same time. And so there's one way that you can have that, which is to have uh, property rights, to have bodily autonomy, and that way people's different ways of lives can coexist. It's just that uh, you're not allowed to go around murdering and stealing, which I think you agree with, and you just have to find the common denominator of those laws and extend that to the rest of society. So I think when you arrest someone and throw them in jail for having marijuana, I think that's the state acting as the mafia, as a thief, and as a kidnapper. And that's the same as if some random person on the street did that. And so my approach is just about being consistent with these principles of that allow coexistence on the greatest possible scale. And yeah, if you wanted to respond, but I could tie that in with my ideas about how a god would conceive of that as well.
No, yeah, definitely God does concede with what you're saying. But uh, let's look at it as more of like an investment. Say there's some negative things that are going to happen and are going to happen for a while, maybe even years before things get better. So it's like uh, what they were using the Africans for, and even the Irish, like in coal mines, they using the African uh, people to like pick tons of cotton like all day and never getting any rest, and it's all bad and it's all obviously wrong. Everybody, even themselves, they're probably saying, "This is crazy, dude. I can't believe they're doing this." But look how much money it's going to make in the future, and look at the great nation that's going to be produced as a result of it. And so here we are. How are you going to tell these reprobate founding fathers that they were wrong to do what they did when we're here reaping the benefits future generations later? Everybody said that what they was doing at the time was sick. That's why there was a civil war. There's two cultures growing all along. Now,
Yeah,
how are
I
you going to tell
think
the South that it's not going to rise again? You know,
I think the way you do that is similar to how the Civil War was. It's people were arguing with each other that you don't need slavery to have a prosperous nation, and they ran the experiment and it worked. And the other thing is like, well, we could have a really high uh, quality of life for the rulers or whoever's in charge at the expense of millions of enslaved people. Well, at that point, it doesn't like the high quality of life for the tiny amount of people is not going to outweigh the low quality of life for the millions of people.
yeah,
So, and there's no reason why we should care about the elites over anyone else because it's not because it is objective. It's we have to treat everyone basically at the same level as the same, and um, there's
no, I
I would
agree with
say
you.
all humans are basically in the same category. Um, like cockroaches, yeah, you don't have to extend human rights to cockroaches, um, and that does have to do with intelligence, but the the span of human intelligence is far greater than that of even dumb humans are far greater than that of a cockroach. And I would say a lot of animals do deserve uh, personhood and human rights because of their intelligence. So it's not.
Say that again. What?
I think a lot of like dogs deserve some human rights, like personhood, um, just because of their.
Personhood. What do you mean, like a birth certificate?
No, that's like a legal document. Personhood would just be basically the status of having basic rights like bodily autonomy. You have a personality. You have the right to not be used as a product. Um, I don't think bugs have that right. I think
What about cows?
cows. I
Yeah,
mean, I guess it's a debate. I am more of a carnivore, um, but uh, at the same time, I also uh, there are some necessary evils. So I would say killing someone in self-defense, bad because it's killing, but morally justified because it is necessary because it would be worse to let the evil person kill you. It would be better to kill the evil person to return the universe back to the state of balance before that destructive act. So, in the case of should we eat cows? I don't know enough about cows to say that, but I think they're on the same level of intelligence as mice, and we have to kill a lot of mice. in order to convert our food supply into uh, pure crops and plants. So, in a perfect world, I think we could just grow meat in a lab and not kill cows, um, or have much more ethical farming. Like I buy grass-fed beef because at least they're given a decent quality of life. Um, they're not killed as babies. I don't think there's anything wrong with letting an animal live a life and then eating it. Um, and the fact that a lot of animals wouldn't even exist if we weren't farming them, I think, is also a positive to the meat industry as well. So it's yeah, I don't think morality is quite as black and white as just if you eat meat, you're wrong, or killing is always wrong, um, or lying is always wrong. I think there's some situations where the information it should be private, so lying is not wrong. Um, but there are times where the information should be public, and so lying is wrong in that case.
Well, yeah, that's I watched a thing with Sam Harris, I think is his name. He's like super good at explaining this from like, yeah, the perspective that there is no God. So how do we really know what is right and wrong? It's like he's some super smart guy and a lot smarter than I am, but I know that he's wrong, right? It's sad to live in a world where you're just born, you have no say in it whatsoever. You never decide. You were just born into this crazy, chaotic world. And some areas are a lot worse than others. Doesn't matter. We're all just basically, these workers that are randomly selected by lottery every day to be executed. And if there is no God, nobody has to answer for that. That would make me go crazy. Just why I believe in a God, and that's why I am sane. It's
Yeah.
my
Well,
explanation for I don't know.
yeah. I mean, it is bleak if there's no ultimate judge, and some people can get away with it. And but I don't. There's some harsh truths out there. That doesn't just because I don't like something doesn't mean I'm just going to believe the opposite. I don't like it when I step in a dog turd, but just I can't just wish it away by belief. So I mean,
I'm with you on that.
yeah. So I don't see any evidence to believe in a God, and morality certainly doesn't convince me otherwise. But I did kind of construct my moral argument from the perspective of a God, uh, because it's well, one, it's in opposition to the moral relativism that a lot of atheists hold, um, and but it's also in opposition to the um, divine command, which I view as moral relativism. It's just if divine command is true, then morality is just arbitrary, and there's absolutely no reason why God has any particular morality. So I thought, assuming there's a God and assuming there's a perfect God who knows good and executes only, well, I mean, it doesn't matter if he executes only good, but just supposing that there's a God and he has a perfect understanding of what good is, it doesn't make sense that he could arbitrate what good is, because otherwise you could have a God that says torturing babies for fun is a good thing. And it would be good just because God said it was good. And like, would you agree with me that it's not possible to have a good God that says torturing babies is good?
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Yeah. So to me, that means that God has figured out what principles are logically correct. Like, there's a logical problem with torturing babies for fun. So it's not based on, well, morality agrees with God, so it's good. It's that God agrees with what is good, and so He is good. So God has figured out what principles logically connect to each other and which work in reality to allow for things to exist and for things to coexist. And that's what a good God would get behind. But under the divine command theory, there's no reason why he would have to do that at all. He could just believe or want anything and it would just automatically be good. Does that make sense?
Yeah, the God of the Bible cannot contradict himself, so there are things that he cannot do, and just throwing that one out there. He's limited.
Well, okay. Well, yeah. A lot of Christians won't agree to that, but I can certainly agree that God would be limited by what is true or what is logical. And
Yeah,
that would be what defines his nature. Um, I don't think a truly good God would just have a random, arbitrary nature.
yeah,
Okay. Well, I mean, like I said, my moral theory is friendly to the idea of a God. I don't think you need a God for it to be true, because whatever principles God is figuring out, he's doing this through a logical process. And even though he would have perfect logic, obviously, he wouldn't be making mistakes. Us humans would be making mistakes, but we still have the ability to um, check ourselves, cross check ourselves, to use logic to some capacity. So, I mean, we're making some progress. Um, so, I think if we're able to take the morality of a God who figured out what is right and wrong, I think we're able to figure out what is right and wrong for ourselves too. Um, and like you were saying the other day, if and today, if the Bible said racism is good or torturing babies is good, that would be an indication to you that there's a flaw in the Bible, right?
hmm
And so we as humans need the ability to know at least some right from wrong in order to even start thinking about God, or else we're going to be easily tricked into following an evil God. Um, so I think in order to even follow a good God, you have to use kind of my moral theory in the first place. You have to be able to have some sort of understanding of what is good and what is wrong before you can even say, yeah, that's the good God right there. Otherwise, you wouldn't be able to tell a good God from an evil God.
So I'm just, I see what you're saying, and like it's awesome that somebody that doesn't believe in God is like, you know, he supports what is, the right thing to do, obviously. So, but there's not everybody is like you, Snake. You know, not everybody is a good person, has a kind heart. You know, there are ruthless individuals out there, and
Yeah.
I don't like that. I
Yeah.
don't. Uh, that would drive me crazy if no one was going to answer for that. And so, I mean, it's great that you can live your life in peace, with this knowledge that you have. I wouldn't be able to do it.
Well, it does.
And that's
It's very frustrating because some of the worst people who've ever lived are in charge of the most powerful institutions. Um, I think all of the governments that exist are shamelessly corrupt and just run by horrible liars, and they're never going to be held accountable, and it's extremely frustrating. But at the same time, that kind of propels me because I know we can make progress, and it's been worse before. Emperors and kings crossed the line, and people rebelled against that. And as corrupt as our democracies are, I think that's an improvement over monarchies, um, certainly. And moving away from slave-based societies, um, definitely an improvement. But I think that's kind of part of what propels me is engaging in these discussions and making some progress. And uh, like the libertarian movement gives me a lot of hope that the progress may be slow, and but we can convince most people. Most people do have good in their hearts. Most people do understand basically live and let live. And you do your thing, I'll do my thing. As long as we're not killing or stealing from each other, that's basically fine. Um, and I part of what I'm trying to do is to get people to realize um, politicians, governments, churches, religions shouldn't be able to tell you to just turn your brain off and blindly trust that they know better. Like, oh, we have to take your money in order to pay for, whatever, the war or the welfare, and you just have to shut up and take it, and we get to tell you how much to pay us, and then we get to decide what to do with that money. That's a mafia, as far as I'm concerned. Um, and there may be some necessary evils. I'm not convinced that we need uh, to force people to pay for basic things, but if you're going to say, taxation is a necessary thing, there are some things that just need to be provided by the government. At least call it like it is. At least say it's stealing, but we have to do it in order for society to not become, you know, post-apocalyptic. But yeah, I think we are accountable to each other in that way. It's not as efficient as if a god could just come in and decide it, but yeah, that's kind of how I keep from
Well,
going insane.
it's more than unfortunate, Snake. It's more than unfortunate.
Yeah.
You know what's going to happen to people who human traffic and uh, molest little children? You know what's going to happen to people who murder and torture babies? They're going to actually end up in a lake of fire, which burneth with brimstone forever and ever. That is the actual truth.
Well,
Obviously, you
unless
probably disagree with that, but
yeah, unless they repent, and then all is good.
there's one thing that you must do, which most of the world, despite what you may think, is unwilling to do. Even a majority of so called Christians not willing to do it because they don't want to let go of their pride and their ego. It's the same thing that, allows these people to sleep at night, thinking that they're right, thinking that there's something that they can say, to justify themselves. And there is no justification for anybody. So, because things like that exist, because this war exists in the world, they're going to answer for it. there are certain people, I believe, if we want to get into some scary stuff now with this discussion on moral foundations, I believe there are people in this world that have done things that are so bad that God has seared their conscience and actually made it impossible for them to put their faith in Jesus Christ and be saved. They are not capable of believing the gospel. Therefore, even while they are living and breathing on this earth, they have been rejected by God already before they even go to
Um, well, I think anyone is probably capable of learning the errors of their ways. I don't think it would be very fair to kind of mind control someone to never be able to see the truth. I would prefer if there was some kind of ultimate justice. I would never support uh, a infinite punishment. I just don't think that makes sense. Um, but yeah, I think well, a lot of the problems I have with the Christian moral foundation is the throwing of good people to hell for just not believing in the gospel. Um, and then, do you need me to repeat any of that?
No,
Okay.
I'm listening.
Yeah.
So, monitor this 4-year-old running around.
Yeah. No, I want to give you the space to do that if you need to, but
So you don't, you don't think that people deserve to go to hell?
eternal punishment, I
Yeah,
don't think it makes sense. I
why
think
not?
um, because I don't because none of the well, if there is an afterlife, then none of the evil that you could do is basically eternal. So it wouldn't make sense to have an eternal punishment. Um, I think if you're eternally stubborn, like I think there are some psychopaths who, in my ideal situation, would be stuck in hell forever, but it would just be dependent upon whether they understand what they did was wrong or not. Um, and truly, if someone commits a heinous act and then they go through a lot of suffering and uh, punishment, and they truly understand what they did was wrong and why it was wrong, just conceptually, I don't see why they would have to be kept getting punished. I wouldn't perhaps put them in the same area as the people that they hurt. Um, but a lot of people on this earth are able to forgive people who have murdered their siblings or children and show that kind of grace, which I think an all-knowing, all-loving God, if you I think there's a no matter what you've done, you can learn your lesson. I don't think everyone would. I think some people would never be able to accept that they've done something wrong. They're just that narcissistic. But in principle, if they were somehow able to mature and grow beyond their narcissism and truly understand how wrong what they did was, I think there's a path to redemption for anyone. And at that point, they're not the same person anymore if you've become something beyond that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but they they still did those things means they still have to be punished for it.
Yeah, I mean, I would
The
think
only way to
thousands of years
resolve,
of punishment would be enough for um, a lot of people, I think, at minimum. But uh,
well, yeah, I think most people would agree with that. If it wasn't in the Bible, I would agree with that. If you know, if it if it wasn't in the Bible that people will go to hell, like I would totally agree with what you're saying. The problem is the danger that we're all facing. You know, is there no God? Well, then uh, that's great, but it's also unfortunate. But then it's like, if there is a God, that's kind of bad. Like 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 either way, you know. Unless you do one thing, it's like that. Most people aren't going to do. So I'm just wondering
well, it's like
what you.
you believe that someone can be redeemed just by putting their faith in Jesus. I believe someone could be redeemed by, uh, I guess, learning their lesson. you know, um, I guess to give an example of something most people know is like the redemption of Darth Vader. Is he's been complicit in the enslavement and killing of millions of people. Um, and in the end, he learned his lesson. He realized he was wrong. He helped defeat the ultimate evil. I
All
don't
right,
think he
let's
was
talk about Darth
redeemed.
Vader.
Well, one sec.
I don't think
I
that's
don't.
possible.
Well, yeah. Well, I don't think he was completely redeemed at that point. If I think narratively he had to die there, because if he had survived in the story, it's like, what do the characters do with this war criminal? It's like, yeah, he learned his lesson, but you still can't let people roam around free who committed war crimes, especially at that scale. So, but I do think after some time, someone like that who learned their lesson, who served their time, at that point, like, do we keep punishing them? Like, I don't know. If we keep Darth Vader in jail for the next 3,000 years, is that enough? I think it's worth discussing.
I think that Darth Vader, if he was a real person,
Yeah.
okay, I don't go all crazy on people. Just think, okay, imagine Darth Vader is a real person. If he was, he would not be capable of doing what he did in that movie because he would have already done so many heinous things that he's not capable of redemption. He's already decided that he wants nothing to do with what is good, what is right. And so, if he's a free person, he ought to be able to have that. And so that's what he gets. You know, I believe that people should have what they truly want in this life.
Well,
I really want,
I think there are people like that, like what you say. It is highly unlikely, but I think that is kind of what's fascinating about that story is it's not about someone who has that hatred in their heart. It's like you it is in the story that he committed some heinous acts to save his wife, um, but that brought him deeper and deeper into the evil. And like at that point, he had basically decided he has committed such evil that basically there is no room left in him to be good, and that he might as well keep being evil. And it's about a good person who gets stuck in that loop of they've lost that line to the goodness because they made a compromise and it led to even more compromising. And I think there are people out there who are good people who can fall into that, and they can lose sight and they can lose hope of ever doing the right thing again because they've already said, well, I've already done this bad thing, so I might as well keep doing it because there is no hope for me anymore. And I think there are people out there who would be able to come back from that. I think most people who commit those acts will not, but I think the uh, the lesson of Luke Skywalker is that the truly good people, will always extend that lifeline to people and say, you can come back if you want to, and it's up to them, I guess. That's why Star Wars means a lot to me. It's not just about the lightsabers and the cool costumes, but
Yeah, I see what you're saying. I think it's like a pipe dream, though, to think that they can be, that they'll somehow change their mind. Like, that was in a movie, but I don't think it happens like in real life.
I certainly agree for most people that would be the case. Um, but if you're talking about a cosmic deity who has the powers to do anything, I think enough time reflecting on what they did, that God could show them all the lives that they've affected, all of the pain and suffering that they've inflicted. He could put them in their shoes. He could show them the scale and of the destruction that they've caused. I think a God could give them that kind of perspective that could teach them a lesson that they never would be able to reach on their own. I think there's a level of power a God would have that most people that would be able to reach more people than any earthly powers. But I mean, I do agree that most people would be unrepentant and would not be able to find the lifeline back to being good. But under enough time and pressure, I think there are a lot of
Mm-hmm.
people who would be able to learn their lesson if the power of a God was applied to that.
Yeah. It's tricky because you
But
talk
I mean,
about, if you think about free will, you give a person complete authority over their own life, and then if everything basically that's alive will grow. So if you grow into a wicked person, you're just going to stay that way. It's not like the tree, you know, this massive oak tree is just going to dwindle down again into a little 2-year old stump. It's they just grow and then they die. Like, so we get to a certain point in life and we are the way that we are, and that was our choice. So I just think that there's consequences to that if you go in the wrong direction. And one of the consequences is pushing God too far to the point where he will not redeem you because you rejected him. And so he rejects you out of your own free will, not because he wanted you to do that.
yeah, I mean, but an eternal God I don't think it would have any reason to ever give up. It would just keep saying, well, are you ready yet? Are you ready yet? And this could go on for, eternity. Um, but I think, I mean, there's tons of real world examples of people who were living hateful, bad lives, and they were able to, they saw something from a different perspective. They changed their lives. Is it Majid Nawaz? I think he used to be a terrorist, an Islamic terrorist, and now he actually is an activist against Islamic extremism. Um, and yeah, I think it is. Um, but there's tons of real world examples of people who turn their life around, and I think you
Hold
would
on,
probably
like
say that.
what kind of people though?
I don't. I mean, they come from all walks of life, but I think you would say that that would probably be done through uh, believing in Jesus. Like people can turn their lives around through that, right?
No, you're basically in the same boat that you were in when you got saved. You still have to grow. It's like if you get according to the true gospel now, not like Hugh Ross, like Steve McRae was saying. I heard that guy does not understand the gospel whatsoever. James White, uh, Benny Hinn, some Joel Osteen guy. These people do not understand what the gospel is. They think that when you get saved, suddenly you're empowered. It's like you get this supernatural ability to live a sinless life and never hurt anybody or do anything wrong. They're out of their minds. That's not what salvation is. Salvation is you get saved, you live forever, and then you decide whether or not you want to be blessed. And if you don't, you're going to be removed because you're not fit to be on the earth anymore. You're going to go home to the Lord. You're just a pilgrim passing on. But if you're someone who is rejecting God, then that will mature and eventually there's no hope for you because of the fact of free will. Now, God could sit there and play around with you for 1,000 years, but that wouldn't be God, would it? He understands what he wants and it's going to happen. It's not going to, he says that he comes quickly. So it's been 2,000 years, but we're looking at God, uh, I don't think messing with someone for 1,000 years is even logical, so from that perspective, you should be right and there shouldn't be a God. But from my perspective, people will receive very devastating consequences that will last forever. But it can be one of two ways, get saved and then never actually develop into a psychopath. That'd be awesome. You could get saved now and prevent that from even happening. We could continue to reject God and eventually, who knows what you'll be? Who knows what monster you will become? And that goes for you, Snake. You never know what's going to happen to you the longer that you reject Jesus Christ. What you're going to turn into. Just warning you. I'm not your enemy, all right?
Well, I just don't see the causal relationship between belief in God and choosing to do it the right thing. If you know, if both God and humans can figure out what the right thing is, then you could just do the right thing without necessarily believing in God. But
Well, yeah, that's what.
I don't mean to suggest that under your or the Christian vision of things that getting saved is like you're just a perfect person from that on. It's more like just the turning point of like, oh, I realized what I was doing was wrong, and I still have a long journey to go to improve. But it's just that turning point where you start to criticize your old ways. But I don't see why you couldn't realize what you were doing is harmful or destructive or wrong just because you don't believe in a God.
I think it's just a matter of free will. And in that free will and the time, there's like a time frame where you have to choose one way or the other. There's like a limit on how much time that you have. And then that time is just going to go on forever and you're going to be in that state for an eternity. So it's like you have a limited amount of time to make the right choice. And then if you do, you will be saved from very bad things.
Well, wouldn't it be plausible that someone might be deep in the evil, but they might be capable of unlearning the evil that they've been convinced of? It might take a long time, but why wouldn't that be possible?
It could be possible. It's just not possible within the realm of the biblical Bible. Or not the biblical, what am I? Good night. The biblical God. It's not in his nature to wait that long for somebody to change their mind. He doesn't wait very long, actually. Once you actually start making decisions about how you don't like God and how he's hateful and all these things, and you start imagining, arguments that you can make against him, it stacks up pretty quickly in my experience. People turn out to be very wild. Other people, it's just like psychopaths, you know. Just because you're a psychopath doesn't mean you're out killing people. You could be a CEO of a headlining bank, you know,
Well, what
in the
about
community.
uh, David Wood? He says he's a psychopath, and he's still a psychopath, but he believes in Jesus and God, and that's what's he claims that's what's stopping him from doing bad things. But he's still a psychopath.
Yeah, he says that he doesn't do bad. He probably doesn't do bad things. I'm sure that there are areas in his life though that are way wicked sinister. Okay, and you know, just because nobody sees it doesn't mean that he's not doing stuff. He's just not doing it openly. You know, people hide. The John Wayne Gacy, for instance, great guy as far as everybody knew.
Well, sure, but
Well,
that
they
could be
found all
true of
those
anyone.
boys.
Yeah, I mean there are serial killers who believed in God. There's Hitler believed in God. Um, so it's not. I don't see what belief in God has to do with anything. I see understanding what is good as prime importance because I mean, one, you could be doing the godly thing and not necessarily believe that there's a God, but you could be agreeing with kind of the same principles as a God. But and also you have to be able to understand good and evil in order to even pick the right God, assuming there is a God and assuming you believe in a God. Uh, Otherwise, you're more than likely to pick the wrong God if you don't understand the difference between good and evil already. So you have to know good and evil independently of God, or else someone could come along and just say, "Oh well, the true God is Allah, and He wants you to behead infidels," and you go, "Okay, well, I guess that's if I reject this, then I'm rejecting God, and then therefore I'm evil, so I gotta accept it." So I think it's really irresponsible to start saying you have to accept God first. I think you have to understand good and evil first. And in that case, why would a good God judge you based on what you accept versus or what God you accept versus what principles of good and evil do you accept? Otherwise, you wouldn't
Yeah.
be able to find the right God anyway.
Well, you know, like it's a great way of thinking. It's just I believe the world will be a better place. The only way to fix what we have in the world today is problems. It's conflicting uh, moral foundations, if you will. Is salvation, the true biblical salvation, which is actually a rare event. Doesn't happen very often, uh, relatively speaking. It happens every day. People are getting saved, but very small quantities that are unnoticed by a lot of people. Even you know, the people who get saved don't end up going to church or doing anything for the Lord, so it just goes totally unnoticed. But when you get true salvation, there are certain things that are no longer possible for you to do. So that ultimately makes the world safer. You know, if it's impossible for you to develop into a psychopath, I would say that that is a great win for everybody. If you just get everybody saved, then we know at least for sure there's not going to be any human trafficking. There's not going to be any Mormon churches. There's not going to be, you know, any slavery because the fact that it's impossible for you to do those things if you're saved.
Well, that sounds kind of like mind control to me. If you're not able to, like, I think someone who sees the light now could fall later. I think, and someone who has fallen now could see the light later. I don't think you're stuck in any certain way. It's just based on what perspectives you see. And there are people who are not psychopaths who do have conscience, who convince themselves like, oh, it's okay if we bomb all these cities because we need the oil or whatever, or they can sleep at night because they kind of feel bad for the children they're screwing over, but you know they have a nice, comfortable, expensive bed, and you convince yourself, you know, the sanctions on Iraq that killed millions of children. Well, that's worth it because then the American power is spread across the Middle East. So, and those aren't necessarily psychopaths. I think people can just convince themselves that it's acceptable, and yeah, it sucks, but they're choosing the lesser of two evils. Um, so I'm not understanding like the connection to psychopathy. I think normal people can make moral compromises all the time and make the wrong decision without being a psychopath, right? Like even
Yeah.
even people who are saved will still sin.
Yeah.
So
You called it mind control.
yeah.
I don't see how that's mind control if you had the free will to become that individual.
Well, if there's something that's stopping you, like externally, I would call that mind control. Like if God is like preventing you from ever falling again, then yeah. But if you're just talking about like, well, if you have this new perspective, you can never go back. Like you can't unsee what you've seen. That's not, if that's what you're talking about, that's not mind control. But if it's like, well, God is actually gracing you with this ability to never get tempted by certain things again, that would be mind control to me.
I believe you can get tempted to go even pretty far, but that's why there's things that are like, worthy of the death penalty. So, for instance, if a Christian, a legitimate Christian, goes out and kills someone, God's not just letting that fly. Uh, his time to die is sooner than he's going to be expecting, and there's just no way around that. You're not going to be on the earth very much longer. So you take an innocent person's life and you belong to God. You're not staying on this earth anymore. There's consequence. You're his son now. He's your father. That is a no. So you get to go home though because you've been saved. As for the rest of y'all who are apparently out of your mind, you don't want to accept Jesus. Still waiting for them to make that decision, for other Christians to decide, if they want to be blessed or cursed. But it's not mind control. It's a free will. You decide to be that person. And then after you be that, after you get saved, you're not going to be capable of joining a Mormon church, or becoming like a Jehovah's Witness. But you could still get into the heretical teachings of Calvinism and the 5 points that they have. You could believe one or two of those. You probably wouldn't end up believing all five. But I mean, there are areas where you could sin and even make grievous sins against God, like adultery, and be put to death for it if we was living under a biblical law.
So I mean, but why would you put believing in Mormonism in the same category as committing murder?
Well, I'm not really putting it in the same category. I'm not saying that Mormonism was worthy of death and the people that go to a
Okay.
Mormon church. I'm not saying that at all.
Well, it's worthy of eternal damnation, right?
Yeah. But specifically, the teachings are so hardcore and strange that if you were saved, there's no way that you should be falling for any of that. You have the Holy Spirit. It's like, yeah, there's a certain point, like you're going to be tempted, but good night. You went into a hospital and burned everybody alive. Like that, something like that's not possible for someone to get saved. Can't happen for someone that's not saved. Even if they started out as a good person, like Snake was right, could eventually end up exploding a nursing home. Who knows?
But not all of them
So,
end up doing that, right?
well, prepare for a bumpy ride, Snake. You could be on a crazy roller coaster life. How old are you?
I'm in my 20s.
Well, good luck.
Yeah, I mean, seems all right so far. But I don't see any reason why a good person could not be convinced of something crazy, right?
Uh, Good person could not be. Well, they could. There are limits. Okay, there are no good people. First of all, but a saved individual.
Well,
There are
why would
crazy things
God
you believe. There's a limit, though. Is all I'm saying.
why would God want to save any of us if we weren't more good than we are bad?
Because he loves us.
Well, then there must be something good, right?
Mm-mm.
He couldn't love something that was bad.
Himself that he sees in us. That's what's good.
So that's I mean that's still good, right?
Yeah,
So
that's the only thing that we have that's good. We're not good in ourselves, though.
a person who acted with the same nature most of the time in most of their interactions with God would be what I would call a good person.
You could call them a good person. You really don't understand what good is. Good is unimaginable. What true goodness, and love, true kindness is beyond anything that you could see or touch. It's called the crucifixion of Christ. There's nothing imaginable, they could cause someone to do that other than, you know, a pure love. You know, you
But people have gone through that for other people before. I mean,
They died and went to hell.
people will lay down their lives or uh,
Jesus not only laid down his life, he descended into hell and burned there for 3 days and 3 nights.
yeah, a lot of people would do that to protect people they love. Yeah.
Nobody would do that.
Oh,
Not
tons
if
of
they
people
truly
would.
knew what was waiting.
Yeah. I mean,
Okay. I disagree, but okay.
okay. I mean, it wouldn't be fun, but
Yeah.
uh, men have gone
Well,
to
it's a reality in
war,
your
which they
situation.
describe as hell for their country. A lot of people would take on a lot more than 3 days of hell to to prevent the suffering of their children or their friends.
They
Um,
say that.
what?
It's just what they say, though.
Okay,
It's
well,
taught.
I mean, I would. I don't know how else you could prove that because no one can go to hell and come back to show that they
Yeah,
mean
they
it.
can. I'll tell you
You
one
can't.
person that can, actually.
Well, I mean, we don't even know that, but he said he did.
Mhm.
Some guy who wrote a book said he did, but so we're in the same boat as anyone else who would say that they would do this for someone else. I guess there's not really a great way to test that, but I've seen the lengths people are willing to go to that they've put themselves through to protect those they love and out of kindness. I don't see why they wouldn't go further than is humanly possible. Um, I'm sure they'd go a lot further.
Maybe. That's all I can really say to you, man. I
Yeah.
mean, it could be what you're saying is true. I'm going to be honest with you. It could be that the Earth is billions of years old, my guy. I don't know. I have no idea. I just hope that what I believe is true. And if it's not, it's a good thing I don't know it. Because if I did know that what you're saying is true, if I knew that was the truth, bad things.
So, so what kind of bad things? What would you do differently? Like, why would you treat people differently if you knew that your time was just shorter on this earth? Why wouldn't you still show caring to the people in your life and try to improve things as much as you could?
All because I'd just be going crazy for the reasons that we've already discussed. I already admitted I'd be going nuts
Just
if there wasn't anybody responsible for the wickedness in the world. So I've just become wicked. If that was the case.
so you would
That's what I am.
so, but that makes no sense to me. Is if you're so in despair and depressed and angry that there is wickedness, why would you join it? Why wouldn't you try to reduce it and try and lash out against it?
Well, you have to understand where wickedness is deriving from, Like people that can't live with themselves but aren't brave enough to kill themselves. You have yourself a paradox here, man. These people shouldn't be alive, but they have no choice. It'd be like me if there was no God. Really have a choice. I'm here. I'm not going to kill myself. I don't know what's waiting on the other side. So this sucks. And I'm just going to go crazy. Just going crazy is a natural path that leads to insanity. Insanity leads to bloodshed most of the time.
Yeah, I just don't understand if you're so against the evil in the world, why you wouldn't try to combat it whether there was a god or not. I mean, if there wasn't a god, it would be up to you to combat it. I feel like you would have even more responsibility to
No.
try and stop the evil because God's not going to do it for you. You're the
Well, I
only
don't
one who
have that
can do
much
it.
of an ego to think that I can save the world.
It's not about
So
saving
it's
the
not
world.
gonna work.
It's just you can save your house. You can participate in your neighborhood.
I don't have that much of an ego either. I don't think I can save anything or am worthy of saving anything.
You can
That would
contribute.
be
Like the dog park by my house is full of dog shit, and I got tired of it. And today I just went up, spent an hour. I picked up everyone else's dog poop, and now the park is better. And I could wait for a god to do that, or I could realize no one else is going to do it, and I could just do it myself.
you did that?
Yeah.
Oh,
I
I
just
know people like you exist. I thought they made prisoners and stuff do that.
well, I mean, no one,
Well, they
no
paid.
one was doing it, so
Well, that's sad.
I mean, it's just kind of. So I think an enlightened person is more about: are you going to actually try and improve things, or expect someone else to do it for you? And I don't know. I just don't understand. I would want to participate in fighting evil, whether I had a god on my side or not.
Yeah.
Like
So what do you
that's how
think?
I avoid insanity, because like, well, at least I can make a small difference.
Well, insanity is actually defined by doing the same thing over and over, expecting a different result, even though you keep failing. So it'd be like I would be trying to live a life doing all these good things, and then every day I'm reminded on the news that I'm failing. miserably. I'm basically making no dent whatsoever.
Well, yeah, it's you don't have to be a Superman and solve everyone's problems. Like, are you familiar with Jordan Peterson?
And I don't know who that is.
Really? He's I don't know, he's gotten pretty famous in the past few years, but he's got this analogy where it's like clean your room before you go and try and clean everyone else's rooms. And
Yeah.
you're not gonna make the entire world clean, but you can clean your room. And it's I guess it's kind of like the parable in the Bible is like take the beam out of your eye before you try and take the splinter out of someone else's eye. And it's just about you can't save the world, but you can improve your little sphere of influence. And if everyone understands that, then the world is saved.
Yeah, but what if that's not enough emotionally? What if my emotions, my hormones don't drive with that? What if I'm just built different and what's left for me? What if I get this impression, like some politicians have, that I actually can save the world? I can make a big impact. And I get involved in the right or the left wing, which are both, by the way, wrong. You know, uh, then you'd be going crazy with power. I mean,
Well, I think there are people who are naturally like that, but I think most people, if they're taught about and shown examples and demonstrated, you can make a difference in your life. You can make a difference in your friends and your neighborhood. That's enough. Because if everyone does that, then you don't need one person to come save everyone, because everyone is looking after themselves. And yeah, it's not going to happen overnight, but I think you can make progress over generations. I think if people understand the concepts of self ownership, of privacy, and we are able to teach children about this, I think most people are going to come into the next generation believing that. I think if we start teaching them, uh, critical race theory in schools, then they're going to start believing that. So it can go either way. But I think you can. I think it progresses because certain ideas are self-destructive. If we teach an entire generation not to have children, well, they're going to die off pretty quickly, and who's going to be less are the people having children. And so that idea, the
right.
bad ideas just don't stick around because they're self-destructive.
So is
They might
this
get
the
a
method
foothold
of
temporarily, but go ahead.
if you was talking to, you know, someone that you really cared about, but they were really suffering from, bad thoughts, and they're, like a serial adulterer or something, constantly cheating on their wife, uh, and she's crying every night about it, and it's like he's always getting drunk and beating her. It's like, what if, like, I was that person? Is this a method of, it's a strategy that you would use to try to sway that person to stop beating their wife?
No, the strategy I would take is to try and convince the wife to leave him, and because like, of course, if
What if he
he's
was like your brother, though? He's like someone really close to you.
well, if he's beating his wife, I mean, I can't side with that. Um, it's better that they go their separate ways and just coexist separately than stay in a destructive relationship.
Yeah. I mean, I think Dr. Phil would say the same thing, though. And a lot of times he don't even get anywhere with those people.
And
So it's like if you can't convert by the wisdom of Oprah Winfrey or Dr. Phil, what can you do?
well,
Aren't they supposed to be like, intellectual powerhouses?
yeah, I mean, they can generally, you can't really convince people, at least in one conversation. Um, they would have to be willing to change their ways and go through therapy, um, which is like the turning point that was talking about earlier, where you're like willing to criticize yourself. A lot of people aren't willing to criticize themselves, but a lot of that is based on how our culture is and how they were raised. If you, and I think there is progress in culture. I think we were able to teach all our generation slavery and racism is wrong. Most of our generation. Um, and I think you could do that with future generations with things uh, like what you were talking about with self care, um, with self respect, and but also with self criticism. I think it is possible for us to teach future generations about how it's not weakness to admit your flaws, how it's actually that's how you get stronger. And like that's kind of uh, part of why that guy I was talking about, Jordan Peterson, is very popular, because some people just break through with ideas in a way that people understand, and it's able to then spread through the culture. And I also believe that, like I said, certain ideas are self destructive and will naturally um, just reduce in their influence because they don't work. And it's kind of like evolution in that way.
Mm-hmm. Let me ask you this: uh, what is stopping you from like believing the gospel? Is it science? Is it something that you have against the God of the Bible, or what exactly is it?
Mainly it's that I don't see any evidence that it's real. And
Science.
the other thing morally, I don't think that the God of the Bible has. I think that it's hypocritical, but mainly, like I could believe that there's a hypocrite God if there was evidence of it. Um, so mainly, yeah, it's I don't see any scientific or evidence otherwise that there actually is a God or that Jesus was resurrected. So, like, I would personally prefer that there was some sort of God that did hold people accountable for the horrible things that they've done, that did give an afterlife to the good people. I just don't see any evidence to believe it, so I don't believe it. Like a lot of things that I would prefer, if I don't see evidence for it, I don't believe it. Like I would prefer that I have the winning lottery ticket in my pocket right now, but unless I have evidence for that belief, I'm not going to believe it.
Well, I'm going to call your bluff. Okay. I'm going to suggest that the real reason that you reject God is because his book chaps your hide and you don't want him telling you what to do. But you're just going to have to get some Vaseline because that book's going to judge you whether you like it or not. All
But
due
I
respect.
reject the Quran and I reject tons of holy books.
Well, you can't reject that one.
But I reject them all because they either don't make sense philosophically, well, none of them make sense scientifically, and I don't think there's evidentiary basis for any of them. Um, and I think all of them are philosophically incoherent as well.
Yeah.
But that's what, like what I was saying earlier, is it's not about I don't want to be told what to do. It's about I see things in this that don't make any sense. Like if you saw the Bible said black people are inferior, you would reject the Bible. So I could just say, well, you just racism just chaps your hide, but that's God's truth. Just get used to it. But it's more about, okay, well, if this book is saying something that appears to be evil, then that's evidence that it's created by humans or that it's just wrong, right?
Yeah. Um, it's sort of a circular argument, I guess, to say, you know, this is right because the Bible says that it's right. And then it's like,
Yeah.
it's just a matter of what does the Bible actually say is the thing. So what I want to believe is that, you know, slavery is wrong. And so it's just coincidence, I guess, that it so happens to be what the Bible actually says. So my emotions seem to connect with the God of the Bible because of the fact that, you know, and if it wasn't, I wouldn't be believing in the Bible. Like if the things the Bible said were not there, yeah, uh, it's just, you know, I am emotionally attached to the doctrines of the Bible, such as a young earth. Okay. I'm attached to that. I like it. I want it to be true. I'm totally admitting my bias. You know, I want the morals of the God of the Bible to be true. But that doesn't mean that I don't have any evidence for it. It's like if I wanted my wife to be faithful, obviously. Well, it just so happens she is. You know, she exhibits all those features. And I don't have a wife, by the way. I'm just speaking hypothetically. Like,
Okay. Well, yeah, I don't have that sort of bias when I look toward the Bible. Like I don't actually care whether what I want is true or not. I only care about what is true. Like I want to be able to eat meat. If for some reason I find a reason why eating meat is wrong, then I'll stop eating meat. Like I guess a better, because I do eat meat. I guess a better example is I guess I would want to just kill whoever I wanted to kill, but I don't because that's wrong. And it's not just because, oh, I might get caught. Even in a world where I was absolute dictator and I could kill whoever I wanted, I would hope that I had the strength of character to say, to adhere to the principles of murder is still wrong. Or, like, if I have lustful thoughts about someone walking down the street, I don't go and assault them, even if I could get away with it, because I respect that person's bodily autonomy, even though I would like it if I could have my way with them. I know that that's a wrong thing to do. So it's not that I want slavery to be wrong. It's that I think that it is wrong. I mean, it would be pretty convenient if I had a slave. If there was a type of person that just was not deserving of human rights and that I could go buy them in the market, that would be pretty convenient for me, right? Uh, but I don't. I think that that is logically wrong, and I think that so therefore I have to behave according to my principles. Um, and I don't know. I think most people have empathy to kind of assist with that because you can kind of put yourself in someone else's shoes and ask yourself, like, how would I feel if this happened to me? And that's part of it. But For me, it's more about just like, is it correct or is it incorrect to do? And I don't care what my personal feeling is, because I can have fun either way. I guess you can say. So yeah.
I don't know. You're kind of saying that you're like you could have fun being good or evil. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I mean, there's plenty of fun to have being evil, but I have a amount of pride that I know that it's wrong. I know taking advantage of other people is a wrong thing to do, so I don't do it. Um, I do have empathy for other people, where I will I'll put myself in their shoes and be like, well, if I was them, I wouldn't want me to do that to me. So I'm going to act according to my principles. So I don't think that it would be right if someone else wanted to take advantage of me. So why do I have the right to go and take advantage of someone else? And it's just like purely logical like that. Um, and the emotional aspect is the empathetic part, where you can actually feel bad for someone else. But on top of that is the logic of basically not wanting to be a hypocrite.
I think you're a well guy, Snake. Like you have the right thinking. There's just like you'd make a great Christian if you was one. But I don't know if you're telling the truth though, as far as you're not emotionally attached to one or the other. I would be suspicious of that, but we'll give you. I mean, I'll give it to you. If that's the case, I look at you as some kind of a robot in that instance, though, because you're not even like favoring one part of the other. It's like you're like I appreciate that you're honest, but why would you not want to, get on fire for one or the other? You live like you said you have like a certain amount of pride, so where's the majority of your pride, and how strong is that? You
Well,
said
it
you're a
is.
libertarian.
Yeah, I
You
mean,
have pride in that.
yeah, I do look at it kind of. I try to be like a robot in a lot of ways. Um, so like with I used to be a communist, and my emotional sense was uh, pro-communism, but I basically argued myself out of it based on, I guess, logic and not what I wanted. It wasn't about like I wanted to take wealth away from the rich people and redistribute it. Um, but it didn't matter when I looked at the logical arguments what I wanted, because what I wanted was morally wrong, and so you know that I changed my mind and I was able to argue myself away from it. Just and that's why I try to be like a robot, because and maybe I didn't choose this, but I have some desire to be correct, and that's kind of my overriding principle is correctness is better than um just getting my preference, I guess.
You need to fill you with the Holy Ghost, and then you'll know what it really means to be right.
Well, I don't know how that's gonna happen. I read the
Fair enough.
Bible and became an atheist, basically. So,
What translation you reading? Maybe you're reading one of these corrupt New World Order versions.
I don't know what. I have a Catholic Bible on my bookshelf, but that wasn't the one I originally read. But they all say the same thing. With any
No.
translation I've read, it's more or less the same.
Oh no. It's not.
There's no verse I've seen that is different enough that would change my mind at all. It's
I think that we would need to do a debate on that. Like, if you really research it, there's major mistakes, errors. Like, as far as correctly translating from the original Hebrew and Greek, drastic mistakes.
yeah, I've never
And if
seen
you're talking
any.
about the Word of God, phew, that's a really big mistake.
Yeah, well, I mean that's one reason uh against my belief as well, is because like if it's that important, I don't think a god would leave people's salvation on the line based on some humans mistranslating things. I think God might have a little bit of a better plan than that.
Well, his plan is to uh, have people fill his word, and if and then his plan was actually to preserve it in writing so that people could learn from that. They could learn something that's ancient, and read it today because it's been preserved. So it's maybe not understandable. God with all the power and all the knowledge, he can be anywhere that he wants at all places at the same time. So, given that, why didn't he come up with a better plan? Why does he leaving it up to a book? That's a question. It's worthy of investigation. But their arguments could be made. Pro Bible arguments that say, well, he did it this way because this or that, and that all makes sense and it's great. But then to any argument, there's an opposing argument.
Well, not just
There,
a book, but a book that apparently has been mistranslated for most people who've ever read it. And a book that
well,
appears to me to be quite evil in any translation I've ever read. So, I mean, just like you were saying, um, if you found racism in the Bible, you that would be evidence that it was wrong. Like, so I have a lack of evidence that the Bible is correct, but I also have evidence that the Bible is incorrect. Like that it advocates slavery, the uh,
no, it doesn't.
killing of gay people, which we could talk about if you wanted to. Um,
That it does.
yeah, so those things are incompatible with a good God, and the Bible claims God is good, so the Bible must be wrong, is basically my position on that.
Yeah, maybe rejecting God because uh, of the specific things that book says. Like I was saying originally, don't like it. That you're reading into the text wrongfully, though. Probably, I don't know how, but if you're seeing slavery in there, that's not in there, my friend.
Well, it's not that I don't like it, it's that it's wrong. It's like factually incorrect.
Well, I'm saying
So,
it ain't in the Bible. The Bible doesn't justify it in any way.
um, so the biblical laws to keep slaves, that's not
What
justified.
do you mean by slaves? Using modern vernacular to uh, define that word.
Well, it's been translated. Is that a mistranslation?
Slaves is not a mistranslation, but it could have meant something back then that does not mean today. Meaning
Well, no, because it's been
slave in
translated to the
Hebrew,
word slave. So,
right?
like,
In
it's so
1611, it was
they didn't
translated to the
speak
word slave.
English back then. So it didn't mean something different. Like that is what it means
What?
in modern English.
So you know what a synonym is, right?
Yeah.
Well, slave. You could use. A slave is somebody that's actually bought, that actually belongs to the person. Like as far as uh, getting punished for certain crimes, like the person that he's working for can actually punish him and beat him. That's why they use the word slave. But just because you can have property of a human body and make them work, and if they don't work, you can even uh, physically harm them. Uh, that doesn't mean that it's like talking about African slavery, like not only owning them but actually abusing them. That's different than making a legitimate profit and treating them like a human being with rights. Except because you agreed to work for me and you're going to get this amount of money when you leave, you actually belong to me and you can't leave. So it's kind of like a different situation. Like at work, you can't just go and clock in or out whenever you want. There's a certain time frame you must meet, and if not, you're removed. So basically, back in in those ancient times, society was different. Most of the women stayed at home with the children. There was a different way to make money. Like there's different things that you have to do at different times. So I'm saying that the Old Testament slavery uh, is accurately translated as slave, but it does not mean an abuse of slavery. So you have biblical slavery, perfectly fine. Abusing slavery, wrong. What do I mean by abusing?
So
Well,
it
you have the right to have that person, but you don't have the right to beat them
so the Bible
when they're not doing
does
anything.
allow slavery.
Yes,
Yeah.
slavery in
So
the biblical sense of the word, in the right sense of the word, not an abuse of the practice of slavery. Okay.
I think the practice of slavery is inherently abusive because you can't own a human being morally, ever. It is inherently abusive. It doesn't matter if you
If
say, well,
if it
you
makes
can't
them a
beat
profit,
them uh, to death, but you can
well,
still
listen,
force them to work. You can still own their children just because they were born on your property. Um, you can still force them to work just because they were born to a slave. That's abusive inherently, no matter what.
it's not because it's agreement. Okay, it's based on a contract. Your children, they don't belong to the government; they belong to you, and so if you as an adult, you have your family and you're going to decide you're going to sell yourself to this person for 7 years and they're going to release you at the seventh year, which is what the Bible says. So
For
you're going
Jewish
to be a slave.
slaves, that's Jewish slaves. Foreign slaves, you don't have to release them at all.
You do have to release them.
No,
I don't know
that's
what you're
only
talking
Jewish
about.
slaves.
No, it ain't.
Yeah.
That's totally wrong, dude.
Now you gotta go back and read it.
Whatsoever. You might want to actually pull it up because I mean we could both sit here and try to look for it if you wanted, but if you actually know where it is and you can show me that, I will put it in context for you.
Yeah, I'll look it
But
up.
yeah,
Um, but yeah, the so it is also abusive to sell your children into slavery. I don't.
no, it's not.
So why
It's
is
fine.
so you would support someone today selling their child into slavery?
If it was the biblical slavery, yes.
And but that so that's abusive
No, it's not.
from anything I can tell. So that's why I don't believe the Bible is correct. Um, I don't know how you can justify the ownership of a human being.
Well, you don't own them permanently. You got to release them.
No, All right, I gotta go. I gotta find the verse because that is you only have to release Jewish slaves. Um,
And you
but
need to be
so
using a King James version.
you don't think ownership of human is abusive as long as you have to release them at some point?
Right.
So as long as you enslave an African person and whip them and force them to pick cotton, as long as you release them after 7 years,
See,
that's
there
fine.
you go. There you go. You're not understanding what I'm saying.
No,
I'm
that's
talking
that's
about
biblical
biblical
slavery.
slavery.
That is biblical.
No, it's not.
Yeah, it
There's
is.
nothing in the Bible says you can beat
Yes, there
someone who
is.
didn't do anything wrong.
Yeah, you
If they
can.
didn't do anything wrong,
Well, the master
okay,
gets to
yeah,
decide what's wrong. If they don't
that's
work,
what I'm saying, man. You're reading the wrong Bible, or, it's not even in there, and you just think that it is.
if a slave refuses to work, do you get to beat them?
Yes.
Yeah, so that's abuse.
No, because you
Yeah.
can't take a member. They have to be able to work the next day. You can't just whip them like with stripes physically on their back. Like you could put stripes on their back, but they're gonna have to be able to work, and you got to be able to naturally care for any wounds that you may have inflicted on them. The Bible says if they lose so much as a tooth, you have to release them completely. So there's no abuse. Okay. It says that you have to love your neighbor as yourself. There's all kinds of laws in the Levitical laws on kindness and how you have to treat, your servants as one that is born in the land. Everyone is under the same law. It's
Yeah, so Jewish slaves have different rules than foreign slaves. Many
Yeah,
of
that's
whom
true, but
never agree to become a slave, so they don't even sell themselves. They're just forced to become a slave, forced to work just because they live in a different country that lost a war. Their children can be forced to work just because their parent was forced to work because of a war.
yeah,
That is just straight up abuse.
that's not wrong though.
Why isn't it wrong?
You're saying that it's
Why don't
abuse.
they
I don't know what you're
deserve
talking about.
human rights?
They already had human rights, okay, when they decided to sell themselves as a slave. Okay,
But
you don't just
they
end up
didn't
a slave
decide.
for no reason.
No,
You
the child of a slave does not decide to sell themselves.
Okay, that's the child though, not the adult. The child belongs to the adult. So if the adult sells him and his child into slavery, it's perfectly fine.
So if a parent decides to sell their child into sexual slavery,
That would be an abuse that you're talking
why is
about.
that? Why is forcing
Because
someone to have sex different from forcing them to work for you? How is that less abusive?
wow. You're telling me you can't tell the difference between uh
Yeah, it's
wanting to
involuntary either way.
it's not
Sexual
it's
assault is wrong
involuntary either
because it's
way, but
involuntary, not because it's
yeah, but those
sexual.
two things, one of them is right and the other one is wrong. Working for money is right. Uh Doing that other thing you're saying is wrong. So no, that's not a part of biblical slavery to be able to do that. You can do the right thing, which is to make money by working. Okay, and if you want to sign a contract, become this person's servant, or you and your gang of uh, loonies and goons decided to make war against the nation of God, and you lost. Well, now you're gonna have to work, and
Yeah,
so that
that's
was a matter of
abuse.
free will.
Yeah, so if you take someone and force them to do something without their permission, that's abuse. Sexual assault is wrong because it is non-consensual, not because it's sexual. Same as if you take anyone as a slave and force them to work for any reason. Even if you're nice about it, even if you just use pillows to hit them into submission when you want them to work, it doesn't matter. It's all abusive. Even if you don't leave a mark.
Well, that's just where you're playing wrong. You wouldn't even be able to survive in a world where that was wrong. In a lot of places in the earth, it's not possible to make it economically without biblical slavery.
So Exodus 21 starts off with the laws for the Hebrew slaves, which are different from the laws for the foreign slaves. And we can go to the King James Version if you would like. If thou buy a Hebrew servant, 6 years he shall serve, and in the 7th he shall go out free for nothing. So that's talking about Hebrew slaves only.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And the use of the word servant is a little misleading because
are you not going to go anywhere else? Because just that verse alone doesn't mean that you have the authority to keep someone who is not a Hebrew captive for all of their life. That's not what that verse says.
That verse is saying
if you buy a Hebrew servant, you're going to release him after 7 years. There's nothing about a strange citizen.
So where does that say that about foreign slaves?
Well, we're waiting for you to give me that verse so that we can.
Well, it doesn't exist.
Context.
That's the thing.
Well, it does. It says that the same laws that go for the Hebrews go also for the stranger. So that would apply to this verse 2 of chapter 21. You got to release them.
Not according to slavery.
What are you talking about? Biblical slavery is a release after 6 years. Hebrew or non-Hebrew.
No, otherwise it wouldn't say Hebrew slaves. It would just say slaves.
That's what you're thinking. It wouldn't say that because you're talking about Hebrews. And then it goes on and puts this in context. It says, what I say concerning the Hebrews, this applies to the stranger that dwells amongst you. Once he comes in, he gets circumcised like everybody and he gets treated the same way. Even if you're not circumcised yet, you still got you can still partake in the Sabbath. You're treated as an equal in the Hebrew society.
Then they wouldn't be making a distinction.
There's no distinction given as of yet. We're just in verse 2 of chapter 21. These judgments go on for quite some time. You could flip open the Bible and point to the spot where it says that Judas hung himself, and to another spot, what thou doest, do quickly. That isn't correct. You can't just take one verse and then build a whole doctrine off of it. You have to compare and contrast all of Scripture with Scripture, precept upon precept, line upon line, here a little, there a little.
Yeah, and so then why do they have different laws for foreign slaves?
There's no different laws for foreign slaves. That's what I'm trying to tell you. And the only evidence you have is one verse, and it's not even in there.
Yeah, I am getting you the verses because I wasn't prepared for the slavery discussion. But as far as enslaving the children, it doesn't actually matter. It's still abuse.
No, because the children will be fine.
And it wouldn't, again, it doesn't matter how long you're a slave. It's
the children have to
abusive.
work regardless. When they get older, when you can't force a child to work in the Bible anyway. So I don't know what you're saying about the children. Like the children have to go somewhere. They're definitely not going into a workforce. You can't do that until you're an adult. So in the Bible, I don't know what bringing children into the situation even means, because they're going to be provided for the person who's actually a slave. They're not going to be a slave. If the person, you know, if their parents are working hard, and doing what the master says, then there's nothing wrong with the situation. The child is fine. No different than any middle class citizen out there.
Yeah, that is different from the middle classes. You can't just force some employee you have their children to work for you.
Well, you're not forcing anyone in the Bible. Either they made it that decision by a contract, they became a 6-year slave by a contract, or they lost in a war.
Yeah.
In which case, there's consequences for sin against the God who rules the world. And sorry, if your children have to suffer from that, you shouldn't made war against his nation.
Yeah,
That's
that's why it's
crazy in the
abusive.
first
You
place.
can start a war on some country and just take some children and as your slaves.
Where does
That's
it say that you
abuse.
can just start a war with anybody?
Uh, God demands the genocide of several people in the Bible.
That's not just anybody. These people actually made war against him. Okay, they were fighting in self-defense. Every one of those wars was a self-defense. You can read it for yourself. There was no offense even taken. After it came to pass that there was nobody trying to fight against Israel because they defended themselves so well, they stopped fighting altogether and actually started living amongst them. So there was no offense even made.
Yeah, that's not true at all. Um,
Okay, find me a spot where they went on the offense and then that other nation was innocent.
when God demands the genocide of the Amalekites, kill every man, woman, and child, not all of those people were on offense. They weren't on
Well,
offense
first of all,
anyway
he didn't
because
command
there
a
wasn't a
genocide.
current war at that point.
Wasn't a genocide.
Killing every man, woman, and child of a certain tribe isn't genocide.
That's under a condition, though. Under the condition that they don't vacate the city immediately. Now, if they vacate,
Well, it doesn't
exile,
matter.
there'd be
That's
no
aggressive.
problem.
That's aggression.
Yeah, because of consequences. The bad things that they're doing, like we was talking about earlier, it's not going to happen. And your children belong to you. So we're not just going to supernaturally take
So you
care of
can
a million
say,
babies. They're going to
you,
have to die.
yeah, you can say, okay, your house is mine now, and if you don't give me your house, I'm going to kill your entire family. It's fine because it's fine if I kill you because you didn't leave your house.
Uh, because, well, number one, this is
Because
God
your
talking.
family
And number
member
two,
offended me, therefore I can take your house. That's essentially what you're saying on a smaller scale.
well, yeah, what if, they'd killed one of the, their, you have somebody that kills your sister or your entire family, and you think that it's wrong to go and kill him and his family and actually live in his house.
Yeah, it is wrong to kill his whole family because they didn't do the crime.
There's plenty of warning, and space to repent for these nations. They can pass the city of Jericho, the first city that they took, 7 days, and someone actually got saved out of that city. His name was Rahab the harlot. If you don't want to make a decision to get saved, if you don't see, the obvious problem that you have of a people who just escaped Egypt by the wrath of God, and they're here to take over this society, which is wicked, filled with really wicked people, it deserves the judgment that it's getting. So all they had to do was just surrender. the innocent, if there was innocent women or children there, well, why didn't they surrender? Why didn't they come out of the city with their children? Because they're guilty of death.
Or because they were defending themselves. You don't have to just give up your city just because some foreign nation rolls up with an army.
It was God's nation, not just any nation. And
It doesn't
they had
matter.
no right to say that
They don't
because
know
of
that.
how wicked that they were.
Yeah, that's the problem. Is you're just assuming that that God is not a, you know, you're just assuming that's the right God. You're assuming that they had a reason to believe that that's the right God, that their own gods didn't seem perfectly reasonable to them. Um, Maybe Israel
Yeah,
has
sure.
been deceived by a devil pretending to be a god. And if you just assume that he's God, then you're just going to be following a devil. There's no actual way to see if you're right other than if you have moral standards that stand independent of what you're being commanded to do.
We all got the same chance that those wicked Canaanites had to be saved, and if we don't want it, we'll be destroyed. You may not like it. That may sound wrong. It is the truth.
Well, they weren't given a reasonable chance, for sure.
Oh, they were given plenty of time to leave.
Just because someone shows up and wants your stuff doesn't mean that's reasonable. Okay.
It wasn't just someone showing up. This was the nation of God. They'd just been delivered from Egypt, and everybody knew about it. In fact, they was already frightened about the fact that they were present, passing the city. Everybody was shaking in their boots, and yet they still didn't leave,
All right. So
despite.
this. So Leviticus 25:44 King James version. Both thy bondmen and thy bondmaids, which thou shalt have, shall be of the heathen that are round about you. Of them shall ye buy bondmen and bondsmaids. Moreover, of the children of these strangers that do sojourn among you, of them shall ye buy, and of their families that are with you, which they begat in your land, and they shall be your possession, and ye shall take them as inheritance for your children after you, to inherit them for a possession. They shall be your bondmen forever. But
Yep.
over your brethren of the children of Israel, you shall not rule over another with rigor. So that's very explicitly saying that there's different rules for foreign slaves and Israelite slaves, and that the foreign slaves, unlike the Israelite slaves, are your possessions forever, including their children. And
Yep.
they never agreed to this.
Yeah. So the difference that you're talking about is the fact that if you're like an entire nation, for instance, that just lost against God, okay, you messed up, you did wrong, and now you're in control, or you're under the control of the Israelite army, okay, and they're going to tell you what to do. And this is not going to end for you or your family after. But here's the thing. You have a culture of people that is stuck in servitude because of the name that they have. Basically, like if you're an Amorite, that's not even allowed in Israel. But like you're saying, you're some foreign nation, you're gonna stay in servitude. But that doesn't mean that you don't get opportunity of liberty within that servitude. So even though your whole family for future generations is stuck, each individual can come out of that. New people that are born have to wait to come out of that when they get older, and then they work, and then they get released. So as
That's
this
not what the
culture,
text
these
says.
people, that's not what the text says, but the text, the law itself cannot contradict itself. So if it says that one law applies to the stranger as well as the Hebrew, then when a passage talks about the difference between a Hebrew and a stranger, then we know we have to put these things into context. So what that means is you can't
Well,
have.
you just said that there was a contradiction. It says
Well,
that there's different rules, but it also says that there's not. So there's no way to reconcile that.
no, there is that. So if you have a Hebrew servant, uh, you have the tribe of Dan, for instance. We'll say you have the whole tribe of Dan. You cannot take the tribe of Dan or any portion of the tribe of Dan, any of their families, and subject their offspring in the future to work for you. Now, if you're coming from a foreign nation, however, that can be done. So, yeah, there is a difference in between, the Hebrew and the Gentile. But when the Gentile uh, is, I guess, now a part of the economy of the Hebrews, I guess there's a difference on the level of it's not like you're not getting freedom eventually. It's not like you're you're stuck and you're just going to have to work for the same person all of your life. Uh, your future generations are still going to be subject to that geographical location.
But it
Whereas
literally
the
says
Hebrew,
that.
the tribe of Dan, they can go somewhere else. All that has to happen though is that generation lives in that society, okay? You have your own family, you work, you get freed, and then you can you can leave completely the nation of Israel if you wanted. And anybody within uh, the Israelite tribes, they can leave at any time that they wanted. If that's what they wanted to do, they could completely live the land. They'd be outside of God's will. But I don't know if a difference in between, you can't subject Dan, you can't subject a Hebrew permanently, and then a foreign nation you can, because it's happening within the nation of Israel. Uh, that applies to everybody. You can't have another foreign nation come in and like make another kind of a rule. Like I don't know if I'm being able to.
Well, but what if they believe they have the right God?
Yeah,
I
I
don't.
don't know. I think I'm losing my the whole the whole thing is getting very hazy now because
Yeah. So I think a major problem is everyone thinks that their God empowers them to do horrible things to other people. So
horrible things though. Yeah, I disagree with that completely. Not horrible.
so I to me the Bible looks like something written by humans who just wanted to keep practicing slavery, or less likely but also possible, written by an evil supernatural being trying to pose as a god, or as a good god at least. Because a good god, to me, would write a book, it seems, would write a book that said, no, every person owns himself. I mean, not even getting into, because there were passages that I skipped over talking about differences between male and female slaves. Female slaves never get to go free, and they're taken uh, as young children and sold off to men, so they're basically sex slaves.
That's not true.
And so this is violating basic moral principles of self ownership and equality. So I can't reconcile that with a good God in a Bible, let alone how it treats homosexuality and other harmless things like that.
Yeah, you really trip me up with a whole different thing. There's give me a headache, man. I mean, I can come back to that later, but as far as right now, caught me off guard. I don't know, man. I'm closing this Bible because I'm not going any farther on that. I'll dig myself into a hole that I'll not be able to get out. So congratulations, you stumped me.
All right, I'll take it. Um, well, we've been going for a little bit. Maybe we can look at the live chat here. If you guys have any questions, you can put it in. I can't put up live chats now because I'm not streaming from StreamYards. So if you got a question, put it in the chat. Scapegoat Iscariot asks, why in the hell would they have to vacate their own city?
Because they don't deserve to be there. The simple answer.
Okay. And I'm just looking for questions. Statements are pretty much aligning with a lot of stuff I've said, and I've been agreeing with a lot of stuff. Yeah, and like I said, Exodus says a man can sell his daughter to settle financial debts, stuff like that. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't agree to that. That's not even in the Bible.
Yeah. Well,
But
yeah, we can always talk more about it. We're going. I
so
think we're
what if
almost at like 2.5 hours, maybe.
yeah.
Um,
Yeah, if there's some other topic you want to go off on, we can do that. I don't. I don't know.
yeah, I mean,
I can't,
I think the main point is just I've reiterated it a couple times. It's just that we have to be able to judge texts like this in order to avoid following the wrong gods, right? So,
mm,
from what I can tell, the basic common denominators of the principles that we can drive, like do not steal, do not kill. Basically, you can derive the principle of, okay, this is because people own their own bodies, people own and therefore, when you use your body to do labor and create things, you own that labor. You own the result of your body doing things. So that's your property. So justifying owning another human or killing them or harming them or detaining them for any reason other than to defend yourself is inconsistent with any good God. And I see those inconsistencies in the Bible. And
your
yeah,
inconsistencies though are, I'm telling you, man, they're super technical. These are like major doctrines, dude. That like you could preach a whole sermon just on what we just talked about, man. Just going over that one little issue of, why these future generations are not going to be able to escape, and then Hebrews, they're still going to be there, even though both are being treated with respect and there's no harm being done, uh, except for the fact they may have lost a war and ended up in that position. Uh, it's like you you're finding something in the Bible that's a lot more complicated than uh, you're making it out to be. So you're thinking that God is completely, this horrible monster because he allows people to be slaves, but you're not understanding what it means to be a Hebrew slave. It's actually not bad at all. It's pretty awesome, I would say, because there's even one place in the Bible that says, if you wanted to be the master servant uh, all of your life, you could actually do that. You could sign a contract. You could get like an
yeah,
earring, I guess, that
yeah.
shows that you're their servant forever. So it was so awesome that you could just
Well, it's
put yourself.
because that was done because the female slave is not allowed to go free. And what's the guy going to do? Just abandon his wife and his children? Or live under his master's roof with his family? It's kind of like
The
entrapment.
female wife can go free if it is her desire. She can leave. It's not like the father is, he is an authority. So yeah, if he wants to keep her there, that's his authority. And so
Well, the Bible
he
says
just, that's
female
just how it
slaves
is.
shall not go free. Um,
It doesn't say that there may be like a condition on that, sure, where there in certain cases they can't go free. It's not like a general rule that you can't release a Hebrew or like a female.
well, you
They can go out with their wives if they want to, if
yeah,
there's consent.
the master can free whatever slaves he wants, but the there's no restriction on how long you can keep a female slave like there is for male Hebrew slaves. And it
Yeah,
explicitly says that
that's true. The
yeah.
woman belongs to the men, yes. It's the
So
way it is.
let's see. We had a couple more questions. Um, Scapegoat Iscariot asks, what in the hell do you think a man is going to do with a little girl that he purchased in slavery?"
Yeah. If he's a just man, he will care for her and wait for a decision to be made on whether they're going to stay or whether they're going to leave. And if that's a good man and he can be trusted, he will release his daughter. And if not, he will take the authority to hold her. And if that's unjust, it is unfortunate, that he would do that. But that man really loves her. He'll just stay. That doesn't mean that it's wrong, because that man sold himself into slavery, okay? And then he got himself a wife. And they both agreed before this ever even happened to get married. So why would you even do that in the first place? It's some other
Well,
man's wife. He's not going to do anything with the little girl. And it's not a little girl, it's a full-grown woman.
well, no. There were female children
Yeah.
taken as slaves
Oh my
in some of
goodness.
these conflicts.
No, there
So,
wasn't.
I mean, you can't blame them for any conflicts that happen between the nations. Um, and I don't think a good man would marry a young child, even if he intends to,
It's not a young child. I don't
keep his
even know what
hands
you're
off of
talking
her.
about.
Well, I'll have to find the passage for next time, but it says, "Take the female children for
Next time, are
yourselves."
we doing a round two on this? I don't know
Yeah,
if
if
I
you
can take.
want, if you want.
Yeah,
Um,
I mean, I do want, but man,
yeah.
I don't know if we can go on. I don't know. We probably have to pick a specific moral and just chase that.
Yeah, like
I,
I'm talking if we do like a slavery specific thing, I'd have all the passages ready. Um,
yeah, preparation would be key to something specific.
yeah.
So pretty general. Went very farther than I thought we would go at this point. We're at
Um, I had another
accusations being made in
question
the
there.
Bible, which really aggravate me.
Oh, Dean Kruger wants to know if you think that if God commanded you to kill your child, would you?
No.
Okay, that's good to hear. Um, and I would assume that's probably because you. Is it because you think that wasn't actually the voice of God, or
Yeah,
okay,
correct. It's not God.
God would never do that?
Never do that.
Well, I think God would never say a lot of the things that are in the Bible. If you can understand where I'm coming from with that.
Yeah.
Um. Uh. Scapegoat Iscariot. Where is the citation that says the little girl who cannot go free according to Exodus 21:7? What does that say? 21:7. When a man sells his daughter as a slave, she shall not go free as male slaves do. Yeah, that's what I was talking about.
Hmm.
Yeah. So, what was this question? Where is the citation that says the little girl who cannot go free? I don't know what his question is, but that's the
I'm just going to
citation.
respond to that by saying that it's not a little girl. Nowhere in there does it say that's a little girl. It's actually referring to her as a wife in verse 10.
Well, it doesn't say what the age limit is, but there is a passage I gotta find sometimes where it says, "Take the female children as your slaves." Let me see if I can find that real quick, and then
Oh, man, that's way out in left field. It's
yeah.
crazy, man.
Well,
That's not that.
if there is anything else you'd like to say, or maybe like wrap it up, your
Yeah.
position.
Um, God doesn't support abusing slaves. He doesn't support, you know, holding women captive and treating them as sexual uh, play toys. He's not about pedophilia. He's not suggesting that you can own a little girl and force her to work. This is not in the Bible. The things that we did discuss in the Bible that we were actually able to nail down a little bit, and I failed probably at explaining what I wanted, was the fact that there's a difference between the Hebrews and the stranger. There are differences, yes, but they are right. They're perfectly fine. They actually benefit the person who's a slave. Uh, and then I don't know what else to even say at this point. With all of those things that you just brought up, I just like, oh, I'd like to take one of those definitely for sure and do this again, and then take it as far as we can go with it. But it's a lot.
All right,
At
yeah.
the last 30 minutes of this debate have been massive hemorrhage in my head.
Yes, well, likewise. Yeah, and I'll get that citation for you about the female children for next time. And
It's been fun though. You challenge me, so I like.
yes, yeah, you're a challenge as well, and I enjoy the challenge. That's what it's about. I think I think there's meaning to be had in the struggle, and learning and growing and stuff like that.
Yeah.
All right, man. Well, thanks for joining us, and thank you to the chat and everyone in there and audience for joining us. And yeah, I'll let you go.
Yeah, I got a pee, so
All right.
it's been amazing.
Thanks, man. Have a good one.
All right, later.
And now I'm distorted. So I'm going to say goodnight. I'm going to take one last look at the chat. Let me actually fix this real quick. Where's the window? Window source. I'm keeping you guys captive so that I can have this ready next time. Single view. Here's a little OBS lesson for you guys. Where is it? Where is it? StreamYard. There we go. And we're going to fix it like this. There we go. Easy. All right. Let's see. Is there anything else in the chat that I need to go over? Faithful, honest, and true. We could have a discussion on this anytime. If you disagree, I'm just going off of the Bible, man. Let's see. The Christian is muddying the waters. He hasn't had a clue. I agree. Female children taken in battle. Numbers 31:18. Let me see here. This is my Bible, by the way. Look at... I have so many references and notes. I can't even... I basically have to read a whole chapter just to sort them through at this point, so... That's why I color-coded them, but it's still... I kind of got to memorize. I got to study which is which. Let's see. 31:18. Do I have that marked off? Where is Numbers? It's been a while since I broke into the Bible. I've been studying more the Quran. There's Numbers. 31:18. And where is 18? Yep, I've got it marked off. What do I have it marked? Women as property. Let's see here. Well, 17 says, "Now kill therefore every male among the children, and kill every woman who has had sexual relations with a man. But you may spare for yourselves all the girls who have not had sexual relations." Well, there you go. That would seem to include female children. Well, thank you, Scapegoat Iscariot, for that one. That was, I think, what I was looking for. Look at the rules for slaves and servants and show me what other religions, so many human rights and land rights to the people of Israel, even the king. Yeah, there's no good religions out there. So, yeah, I think the fact that we need to contradict religions to make moral progress is very telling. Faithful, honest, and true. Show me where 2,000 years ago slaves and servants and general population had land rights and servant rights under any other monarchy at that time. That I don't have to. It's wrong to have slaves, even if you have the best laws of slavery. So there you go. If a master had sex with a slave, he would be put to death. That's not true at all. I don't know where that's put in the Bible. Women were basically treated as slaves, even if they weren't officially slaves. Citation needed, that's right. Yeah, I'm going to have to figure out how to run OBS through Streamlabs so I can put up chats. Because right now I'm running Streamlabs through OBS instead of the other way around. I think I know how to do that. Oh well. Well, I think that just about wraps it up. Faithful, honest, and true. If you want to talk with me about this topic, you got my email. And then he replied, "Unless he married that slave, he can't have." Yeah, of course. You can force a slave to marry you. I understand that. It would be wrong to have sex with your slave before you forced her to marry you, right? So, yep, look out for number 1. Says women were an investment. Yes, they were. they were treated as property, just as being a woman. So yeah, tomorrow I'm going to. I think I'll just, unless I change my mind on this and I make something real quick tonight, I'm going to be doing a Fundy Sunday, which is going to be a a debate review of Kent Hovind and Call Me Emo's debate, and I'm going to have Call Me Emo on the show with me, and we're going to be reviewing his review in preparation for my debate with Kent Hovind, which is next week, right? Yep. Next Thursday, I think, the 7th, which should be the best one. Perhaps might be the last one. Yeah, I'm not going to go easy on him in a number of ways. So be sure to tune in and check that one out. I think we're going to go. I got to check in with him, but I think we're going to go live midday. So earlier than this one today. Anyway, oh, look at that. Detach the chat box in StreamYards and use the window in OBS. Oh yeah, I'm not actually live in StreamYard. I'm streaming from OBS. So the StreamYards actually isn't attached to this stream, so it's not getting the chat. Yeah, so I'll have to figure that out. But yeah, thanks for watching and tune in tomorrow. And gotta find my outro. There we go. Dog bless.